All right, guys. So we're on our second section of our PowerPoint for our first class. So hopefully this is a review for you. I haven't had you guys for legal research, and I don't know if you've taken yet, but like to talk a little bit about legal authority. So our sources of law in the United States, we have a constitution, the US Constitution. We also would have our state constitution. Then legislation. So legislation, again, could be state legislation down in Springfield or federal legislation, which is, the US Code, or another word for legislation would be statutes. Then we have case law, common law, judicial decisions that come out by judge-made law. Then we have, and this is a big, big, big part of environmental law, uh, administrative agency regulations and rulings. So think of the EPA and all of the rules and regs that they put out relating to everything from, clean air, clean water, toxic waste, things like that. And then we have executive actions. And really in the past, 6-10 years, because our Congress has a hard time agreeing on anything, when people have a hard time making compromises, a lot of the law is really being made by executive order, right? By our president, or in Illinois, it would be our governor. So that would be executive orders. And while treaties are usually signed by Congress, but, treaties that are approved by the executive. So that's kind of like where we get our law from. So if we're asking like, oh, what's the law? Those are 4 different places that we have to look to see what the law actually is. Okay, and then we have, the terms that they talk about. Primary authority. Primary authority is the law. Okay, so where from those 4 sources, an actual legal pronouncement that is binding on people who live in our country, okay, or who are currently in our country. Primary authority, primary law really is what a law is. Okay, and then we talk a little bit about secondary authority. So secondary authority is not a law. Secondary authority are materials like your textbook, like treatises, articles, law reviews, encyclopedias, digest. They actually either help explain the law. So think of like our textbook that's talking about environmental law, or if you go to a law library and then there's a book on contracts or family law or something like that, right? It helps you explain the law. Or articles that, materials that help us find the law, like a digest, an index of a case reporter. But secondary authority, if you don't cite them as law, because they're not law. Okay, so it's just like a source that helps us either explain the law or find the law. Okay, so you might hear those terms in the environmental arena or elsewhere. Okay, so if there are environmental laws that are issued by one of those 4 areas, how are they enforced? Okay, so we could have our civil lawsuit. Hey, you know what? You put toxic waste on my property, right? I'm going to sue you for either money to clean it up, or actually what we'd call injunctive relief. Injunctive relief is when you're asking the court to either get someone to do something or to stop doing something. So I might say, I want the money to clean it up, and I want you to stop dumping that stuff in my property. Okay, I'm asking for injunctive relief. Okay, before you can bring a lawsuit, you need what we call standing. So standing means the right to sue. Okay, so if I, live in Arizona and I file a suit about a property in Illinois where there's toxic dumping, right? I don't have the right. I don't have any legal injury, an injury in fact, they call that. So I don't have standing to bring that lawsuit. So, early on in environmental case law, after things like, Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act were enacted, Environmental groups tried to bring civil lawsuits pursuant to those statutes. So one of the things that the early cases, and we'll talk about these as we go into the history of environmental law and talk about the acts in particular, um, is whether or not these environmental groups have standing. So if they have the right to sue. So courts have found that there is a standing if they have member or members who have been injured, if they have injury in fact. So if I am suing about Yellowstone and I'm the Sierra Club, I have to kind of allege that I have members who use the Yellowstone Park regularly and are harmed about, some certain a decision to do logging in Yellowstone or something. So you have to allege actual injury to yourself or to members of your group if you're an environmental group. Okay, so that's a civil lawsuit. Again, you go either for them to stop doing something, start doing something, or for money damages. Um, then we have administrative action. Okay, so the agencies, say the EPA, can go and bring like an administrative action against a company, a polluter in some way, for violations of one of these environmental laws. So they can be fined. You can have an administrative order. If they have permits to process chemicals or manufacture, those permits can be revoked by the agency. So those are the kinds of penalties. There are actually like sometimes these administrative actions have like pretty severe penalties um, that can be invoked. And we'll talk about those in particularity when we go through the individual statutes. Okay, then you can have criminal statutes. So there are, for violations of some of these environmental laws, if there's intent, if they're bad enough, a criminal action might be brought against an individual or a corporation. So that's a criminal action. It's brought by the government, your district attorney, the Department of Justice, the state's attorney, whatever it is where you live. And you can be fined or even, imprisonment for severe violations of environmental laws. And then if you are dealing with tribal land, reservation land, they will have their own environmental rules, and you might go to the tribal courts for assistance if there are violations of tribal rules. All right, back to legal research. We're talking about researching a legal issue. So things that we're looking for before we start researching any legal issue, we have to figure out, well, what kind of enforcement action, who's the law that's involved here? Is it, local? Is it state? Is it federal? Is it tribal? Okay, so that helps you figure out if you're going to bring a lawsuit, where you're going to bring that lawsuit and whose law applies, right? So if I'm in Illinois, I'm not going to be researching, Arizona law. It just doesn't make sense. And then when you get a research project, you want to find out from the attorney that you're working with, what do they want out of this? Do they want just a letter? Do they want, a very thoroughly researched legal memorandum? Do they want to write a motion? What do they want? Do they want you to just pull some cases and some statutes and staple it and put them on their desk? What do they want? This question, you talk to me, I'm a legal research teacher. Does the project require primary authority or secondary authority? It's like, I would never say things require secondary authority. So it's usually primary authority. Somebody may be like, oh yeah, look at the treatise on environmental law and see what it says about X, Y, and Z. And when you're looking at that, they're going to cite to actual primary authority in there. So if you're going to use that, I would also back it up with some primary law. Which of the 5 sources of law? Is it constitutional? Is it case law? Is it statute? Is it administrative, or is it an executive order? And then where and how am I going to do it? Am I going to go to books? Am I going to use the free internet? Am I going to use a paid database like Lexis or Westlaw? And how should I describe this problem? That's when you're starting to formulate your legal issue. So those are some steps you take. So the textbook kind of talks about this journalistic approach when you're trying to come up with your research. Who's the who, right? Who's the alleged injured person, who's the alleged person or entity that's doing the injury, what is happening, when it happened, where it happened, and how it happened. So that might be able to help you when you're trying to formulate your legal issues that you want to research. So you can look at the textbook a little bit more on that. So I don't know what experience you have with paid databases, but databases like Lexis, Westlaw, and FindLaw, Bloomberg Law, um, the steps you take when you're on Lexis or Westlaw really is you choose a source. Okay, so you log in and you're like, well, where do I want to look, right? Remember, we talked about this 2 slides ago. You have to figure out, where is this happening? So you want to make sure if it's a federal issue, you're looking in federal materials. If it's a state issue, you're looking in there. Is it case law? If it's case law, I'm only looking at cases. If it's a statutory question, am I looking at statutes? So choose your source and make sure it's the correct source and not too large and not too small. And then you formulate a search using what we call Boolean logic. Charles Boole was a mathematician who came up with this concept of using words to search documents, almost like math. Okay, so using our basics, if there is a phrase like Clean Water Act, we don't type it in just like that. We type it in enclosed by quotation marks. And this keys the database into saying, like, let's read this like it's one word, Clean Water Act. And we're only going to get a match if it appears in that exact order right next to each other. So quotations for known phrases or terms of art. Okay, then we have what we call our terms and connectors. So if we wanted Clean Water Act, and we also are interested in only Illinois stuff, we use Clean Water Act, then the word A&D, and then Illinois. And I'm going to get a hit if the phrase Clean Water Act appears in a document and the word Illinois appears in the document. Or we use for synonyms, not synonym, for words that kind of mean the same thing. So Clean Water Act and pollution or dumping or waste, something like that. So things that, words that kind of mean that you want one of those words to appear in your document. So Clean Water Act would have to appear in every document. And one of those other 3 words. Okay, those are what we call those terms and connectors, those Boolean connectors. There's also, if and makes it too large, we have these what we call proximity connectors. So Clean Water Act /S dumping means I want the phrase Clean Water Act to appear in the same sentence as the word dumping. This would be /P would be the same paragraph, or a number of words like /25. Okay, that's your proximity connectors. And then here's just an example of a search query. So Clean Water Act as a phrase and lead and Illinois. So that's just some examples of how to that's like legal research, CALR in like 5 seconds. Okay, so we're going to take a break on this little video and go to the next thing on your module after video 2. Oh, okay. So one of the things, let me jump then here, that I want you to do right now, and this is just so you don't have to sit here and listen to me ad infinitum. You're taking environmental law because you're interested in environmental law. So I want you to just do a little exercise as our classwork, is to, try some of our standard employment websites and look for jobs and see what looks good to you. And then for your classwork, you're going to just do a little 2 paragraphs. One would be what the first paragraph is describing a job that you would like. And I don't really care about like oh, I have the experience, or I don't have the experience for this. It's just kind of like a dream job, aspirational. So the first one, describe the job, the qualifications, and the responsibilities. And then the second paragraph, say why you would like this career and why you think you'd be good at it. This is just your personality and your work ethic, why you personally think would be a good fit. So just some ideas, something a little bit aspirational, and just like 2 paragraphs. So that is what I would like you to work on before you get to video 3 in this module. Okay, so work on that and then come back to video 3.